What's up, guys? My name's Miller, and welcome to this super cool video. I have with me the one and the only Robert Riedl. He used to work at HeR Interactive from, correct me if I'm wrong, 1997 to 2012.
About so, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet.
It's a
Yeah,
long time ago.
exactly. Yeah, no, it does seem like so long ago, and I actually think back to those days quite often because I don't know, I miss those days of HeR Interactive. And we'll get into that in a bit, but yeah. So Robert's been there, or he was there for a very long time, from Secrets Can Kill all the way to I think just before Tomb of the Lost Queen released.
No, actually, I was on board for Alibi and Ashes and a little bit of the one shocking, the one with Tesla.
Oh, Deadly Device. Okay.
Deadly Device, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, cool. So that one came just after Tomb of the Lost Queen. So you
Yep.
was someone else working as producer? Because let me just go back to the beginning here. So what was your role
Yep.
as at HeR Interactive?
Sure. So I started as a program manager, and then as our team started to grow, I took the role of director of product development, and then that ended up becoming executive producer. For about until Alibi and Ashes. And then with Alibi and Ashes, I think it was like production manager overseeing the scripters, working on actually creating the scenes, we call them, or threading through all of the shots that you would see in the puzzles and the logic and all of that.
Okay. So you took on quite a huge job there for the latter part of your time there.
Yeah. So as executive producer, essentially I was working with all the leaders within creative, so art, animation, script design, development, to define and then to drive the overall vision for the game. So essentially, I was responsible for what you would see when you started installing to when the game was complete.
Okay. And so you guys started a development cycle of around 2 games a year back in 2001. And
Right.
so was that a difficult transition from just 1 game a year? And were you worried about it succeeding?
Yeah. It was one with a lot of risk, because we couldn't eat into our current production cycle, so we couldn't stop the development of a game. We had to motor on, and still we had to get to a cadence of developing a game about every 5.5 months, because there'd be an overlap. But luckily, we had a very talented program manager at that time, Jen Beers, who had come from Microsoft, and really looked at the problem and worked to figure out how we could do that. And then also, it was great to have support from Megan Geyser, who was the
Hmm.
president CEO at that time. Essentially, she said, "What do you need?" And we told her, and she provided for it. So it did require some increase in headcount, but again, we got to the point where we were on a cadence of two every year. And at that time, it was pretty much unheard of. One of the reasons is because we didn't create a new engine every time
Right.
we had to release a game. So essentially, we were just putting a lot of resources into the actual content of the game.
Right, yeah, because you guys didn't officially change the overall look of the games until around the Secret of Shadow Ranch, was it?
Yeah, I mean there were different, yeah. So there were different stages where there was, some sort of a significant overhaul, to UI, or how we actually produced the game.
Hmm.
Another one was the transfer. So we used an in-house scripting language, kind of like HTML or something like
Right.
that, to actually create the different scenes or views within the game. And then we moved over to Lua, which is a language that's more extensible and more easily worked with. And then it was also easier to find and train people to actually create these scripts as well.
Okay, so that's because you guys had an in-house engine and language. So then, did you guys keep that in-house engine the whole time, or did you? Because I don't know much about programming or how all that works.
Yeah, so we always used the engine that we had developed in-house.
Yeah.
There was, again, when we moved over to Lua, there was a major overhaul of the original code base.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
So yeah,
sense.
and it was Peter Christensen, I believe, who led that.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I was actually just playing Alibi and Ashes the other night. I've been so bored. I've been playing the games backwards from the most recent one all the way to the oldest one, and something that I continually find with the games you guys made is, and I am impressed by it. And I don't know how you feel, if it just became normal or if you were continually impressed by it, but just the polish that goes into the games, the amount of love and care in every single shot, in every scene, all the dialogue, all the writing. It's such a rich series of games, and you guys managed to keep that up for like a decade and a half easily. And so, what what do you think drove that? Was it the fans? Was it the overall energy in the offices?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of things. So we always saw ourselves as a content company rather than a technology company. That's why the majority of our resources was into developing content, mainly the artwork.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and we also had a really good sense of the customers, of the people who are playing the game, as well as the brand. And then the team was great, right? The team was really behind the overall mission of the company and the brand, and the customers, the players, as well as the overall game. So it was definitely a labor of love. We had a lot of fun doing it. It took a lot of work, and it's when you're working on it, you're very heads down. But
Right.
then you've mentioned something like people are still playing the games, which I just find amazing. It's really interesting to see what you've worked on many years ago just take off, right, and
Hmm.
have a life unto its own, and still have an impact on people. It's very humbling and very strange experience.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's been around. The games have been around since I think it was '98 or late
Yeah,
'90s.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, 98 is when we released Secrets Can Kill, and
Right.
then there were the predecessors, Vampire Diaries and Mackenzie and Company.
Right. Yeah. So let's go way back in time. So you worked at American Laser Games while they were still owning Her Interactive, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So HeR Interactive was a spinoff of American Laser Games.
Yeah.
It was founded by the CEO's wife, Patricia Flanagan,
Her
who
Interactive was founded by Patricia.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was her idea. So that was her brainchild,
Okay.
and she's the one who drove Mackenzie and Company and Vampire Diaries as well.
Okay. And so
So
when did you sort of come into Her Interactive? Had the Vampire Diaries released?
no, so I started actually as an accountant
Okay.
with American Laser Games.
Okay. Oh
So
wow.
I was there when HeR Interactive started. So
Okay. Yeah.
when Mackenzie and Company started, I wasn't in product development. I was on the back of the house
Right.
counting beans,
Yeah.
mainly for American Laser Games. Uh, and then the opportunity came up to move over into production as program manager in '98,
Okay.
when Secrets Can Kill was about halfway through production, and
Okay.
I totally jumped on that
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the coolest decisions I think that could have been made.
Yeah, and again, I had never made a computer game before,
Right,
played a
yeah.
lot of them. I actually read Nancy Drew as a kid because I had two older sisters, so I got the hand-me-down books. So I knew about the brand, and
Right.
I loved adventure games too. So I just felt it was a good fit, and that's how I made my case to crawl my way up to the top.
Brilliant, yeah. I actually so I posted on Twitter and on YouTube. I just said if anyone has any questions they want me to ask you, just
Oh,
let me know. So I've got a few questions I want to ask at the end, but one of the questions
sure.
was actually oh, I forget who asked. I should have written it down. They asked if you were there during the selection of who played the voice of Nancy, which was chosen to be Lonnie Manella, or if that was already chosen when you had joined.
Yeah, so Sherry Greener Ray, who is the then director of product development for Vampire Diaries, at least,
Hmm.
and then also for Seekers Could Kill before she moved on to create her own company, uh, uh, was the one who had chosen Lonnie Manel.
Oh, okay.
I would imagine as director of product development, she would do that.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of background in the games industry as well, so she had great contacts. So that's probably how she got in touch with Lonnie.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And so talking, keeping on the subject of Secrets Can Kill, so you were a part of the team that remastered that game in 2010. Uh, so what was that like? How'd that go?
Yeah, blast from the past. Uh, so I got on. I came onto the team about midway through production for Seekers Can Kill,
Hmm.
and a lot of the staff had left, and so um, essentially it was my job to collect all the pieces and put it together. And meanwhile, Laura Henyon, our creative director, art director at the time, art
Yeah.
creative director both, uh, uh, she was building all this content. So she was putting in all the messages and secret codes
Okay.
all over the place. And I'm a big stickler for a good story and narrative, and I just thought like, well, who's putting these like riddles down? It just drove me nuts. And there's a lot of conflict about this, like, well, but codes and clues and all this stuff is all about the Nancy Drew thing. I'm like, yes, but there's got to be someone behind it. um, and there were also like holes in the plot too. So I was really itching to do this because I felt like I want to close all these gaps.
Yeah.
Um, so I totally threw myself into it, and then also I had an understanding of how it was made as well.
Hmm.
So we did actually reuse a lot of assets. Um, um, but then we also either re-rendered them or took their models or enhanced their models or made some things we just had to make from scratch. We also did use the original voice as well, but I think there was one character we had to recast because there were issues or we
Okay.
needed additional voiceover. I think we may have actually Lonnie did the casting
Oh, really?
for that. Yeah, so
Oh, okay.
she got all the voice actors. So I think maybe we actually got her to find those
Oh,
voice actors
interesting.
again.
Okay.
I don't remember that, but it was a very small budget.
Hmm.
It was essentially me and Tim Burke, the
Oh,
creative
really?
director. I think 3D. I think the 3D artist. I think Tim was doing a lot of the 3D art,
Oh,
and
wow.
then maybe an animator as well. And then that was it. And then I had to
Wow.
go to the scripters and beg for like extra time to build in all the scenes. Um, but it was neat to do, and it was successful too. I mean, it hit the marks that we wanted to hit.
Hmm.
So it definitely was profitable for the company. I just don't know to the scale of whether it met it or not. But I thought it was a cool challenge. It was a way to kind of clean up mess
Right.
um, or I guess try to cover up for the sins that we put into production in the first one. And then it
Right.
was only one CD. It was only one DVD, so you
Right.
didn't have to do
Yeah.
the switching thing.
Yeah. Um, were you guys? Was there ever any other talks of remastering any other of the other games? Or
Yeah.
oh,
Yep.
really? Okay.
Definitely. Yep. 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 So there are talks about remastering. Like Message on Haunted Mansion, since it was very popular.
Hmm.
Improving navigation, maybe adding some
Yeah.
things like that. So
Oh, cool. Oh man, yeah. I have always wanted another game to be remastered. I know I've actually interacted with a lot of people who weren't a huge fan of Secrets Can Kill remastered, but I personally really enjoyed it, and I just think such a fun. It is refreshing to go through it, and like the lighting's improved, and it's just smoother, and it just sounds like clean. And I would have loved to have had that from of the earlier games for sure. And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of polls online, like if you could remaster any of the games, which one would you remaster? And quite often, Haunted Mansion is one that comes up
Yeah.
as one that's on that list. Um, was there is there a game that you find you remember having the most fun working on?
Um, yeah, I mean they were all fun.
Mm,
Well, there were some that were more that were a little painful. Um, the early ones were fun because in the early days we didn't have a lead designer, so essentially
right.
we all got into a room and threw ideas out and ran with them, and so it was really a fun group project. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of crazy ideas.
Right.
I remember Erin, our scriptwriter, in Treasure in the Royal Tower, just she really wanted to have like this giant anvil on top of the like slider puzzle. So you can just like release it and kill the puzzle and
Oh,
just
I see.
just win that way.
Yeah.
Oh, and Aaron would always go like, maybe we could get an anvil and maybe we could like have this chain and maybe.
Right.
So the early days were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But there were also some in the later series too, like Phantom of Venice was a lot of fun to put together. I
Right.
remember getting 3 Italian professors at Clarendon where we would record the voice actors,
Oh, nice.
just to provide like the background banter that you would
Hmm.
hear on the streets. And they're like, "What do we talk about?" And I'm like, "I don't know, just So we had to give like different scenarios, like I don't know, say like you're new to town and you're trying to like find out where to go,
Right.
and it was 2 men and a woman, and I remember they were doing a scenario and they started laughing. I'm like, it's so funny, and the woman said, well, I said, I'm new in town, where's a good place to eat? And the other man said, well, my apartment. So I thought, so they're like, can we do this? Because they would always we'd always have to cut because they would self-censor because they're like,
Hmm.
no, that slang is not appropriate for kids. And so they're
Right.
like, is that okay? I'm like, that's fine. But there's, yeah, Phantom of Venice was fun to put together for that kind of soundscape. Curse of Blackmore Manor is just very dear to my
I
heart.
was gonna say I heard that one was a big, like that was your sort of lead game that you worked on.
Yeah, yeah. So prior to Curse of Blackmore Manor, again, we designed as a committee, and then there would be people who would take on the lead for things. I would tend to take the lead for story, and the art team more for visual direction. But with Secret of Shadow Ranch, I was on sabbatical, so I wasn't really there for the majority of the design work.
Okay.
And when I came back, it was chaos and people were really burnt out. There wasn't any clear roles and responsibilities, so people felt like dumped on to get something out and they didn't want to, or felt there was just a lot of critique. So morale was really, really low with that game. Um,
Interesting.
it was just
Interesting.
painful to get to the finish line, and people were burning out.
Really.
So in discussions with Megan and the other leads, we decided to have this lead designer role, who would be responsible for coming up with the overall vision, the overall story, and then define and direct, what people are going to work on in terms of puzzle design and stuff like that. And I think it worked out. It gave people respite. We had what we would do is I would trade off with like the creative director. So I would design one, then the creative director would design another one, and then when we hired Kathy, then she became the full-time designer.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about that because Blackmore Manor is one of the fan favorites of all time, and I don't
Mm.
it's like I can't go anywhere on the internet without hearing someone saying that it's their favorite game. It's so that's just it's so interesting to hear that it was such a bit of a low point for the company, but it just turned out to be one of the biggest games in the series. Like fans will constantly go back to that, like, oh, definitely try out this one. It's favorite game. It's yeah, that's wow. I had no idea.
And I think maybe one of the reasons too is because with the lead designer, then we didn't have this committee structure, so people could
Mm.
really take the time to focus on what they really wanted to do and what their strength was in terms of animation or 3D art or puzzle design, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you ever go back and replay the games that you've worked on, or have, or did you
Uh,
actually do that, or?
no, I don't. You know, those games took out 6 months plus of your life. So
Yeah,
you essentially played them over and over and over for 6 months.
yeah, for sure.
So by then you're just ready to move on. I actually did. I did actually watch you walk through some
Oh,
things.
really? Oh,
I saw you walk through Ghost Dogs.
oh, cheers.
Um, so you know, it was funny to watch it. Just
Yeah.
it brought all these memories. Like, oh, I totally remember that. You know, yeah, it just brought like a wave of memories,
Hmm.
and I thought like, yeah, it still kind of sounds and looks pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great game. I absolutely love that game. That's just, to me, it's a classic one. I think any game before Danger by Design, to me, I consider a classic, and then
Mm,
number 14 just sort of moved into this new sort of era of the games. That's what I kind of felt.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. It feels like the Danger for Design just it created a different tone,
Hmm.
a different yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not sure what accounts for that. That'd be kind of interesting to think about what was happening that that resulted in that change.
yeah. I mean, because that was, I think that game released in 2005. I think it was. Must have been 2005. Yeah, and so that was the first to release in that year. And all the same, there was, and I've played these games 1,000 times. I consider myself a bit of a knowledgeable person when it comes to these games. So I know that the UI did change between number 13 and 14, and
And 13 was less train
yeah,
to
that
Blue
was
Moon
the one.
Canyon. Okay.
Yeah, um, and so I think there was a bit of a change between the look of the games, because I think the resolution into the window got a bit bigger,
Right.
and so that, I think that changed something. I don't know. I don't know if that's. I don't think that would do it, but you guys got a new logo for the games as well, like new box art and everything. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that was maybe when we were hitting our Elvis year as well.
Mm,
So we started to branch out. I remember, I think at that time I was doing a lot of pitches for different properties.
okay.
So I was working on creating design concepts for other properties besides Nancy. Sorry.
Right.
Or we were also looking at like the casual game and Game Boy and all this stuff.
Right.
We did start to build up our team, but also um, I think I think the creative leads were also maybe distracted too,
Okay.
because we were working on a whole bunch of other projects.
So you guys, talking about branching out, you guys did a few different ports of a couple games. So you did like Haunted Mansion on the Game Boy Advance. You did Icicle Creek
Yeah.
on the Wii. But then you guys also did the Hardy Boys on the DS, as well as the Dossiers and then the Cody Capers. So in most cases, there was only like one game for the Game Boy or one game for the Wii. Did you guys planned on doing more games for those platforms, correct? Or
Um, we didn't really have like a vision. I think they were more testing out the waters,
okay,
or there was some sort of business opportunity that made itself available that we then took advantage of. Um, the other thing is that like Megan really wanted to make sure we weren't distracted. So,
mm,
you know, she and the board recognized that the classic series was key to the company's success.
mm,
I think, you know, maybe we didn't necessarily hit our mark, or just the opportunity was not interesting anymore. Um, which led us to abandon it and
Right.
abandon it and move on to something else. It was tricky because we definitely wanted to expand and reach out, but we also understood we had lightning in a bottle. Um, and I think in hindsight, I think our spin-offs were too close to the classic. I think
Mm.
it was always held to the paragon of the classic, and I think to really do new product development good, we really needed to be separate, from the classic to come up with something completely new. And the casual team started moving into that direction,
Right.
but there was this fear, right, of losing our current audience, but then there's also the problem of cannibalizing your current audience and just creating uh, a, a spin-off of your current game series.
Right.
So it was a very challenging time. I wish we would have been able to acquire another IP, because I think we came up with really great ideas for them,
Yeah.
that weren't Nancy Drew games. But unfortunately, just it never happened.
So, could you talk about any of those IPs that you had maybe lined up, or that
Um,
is that not
there's
a
probably some. Yeah, I probably can't.
oh,
I'm
bummer.
sorry.
Well,
I'd
no, it's
love
all good.
to. It was cool.
Yeah.
So they were like book and TV and film properties. So I got to go to like CBS in New York
Oh,
and Warner
cool.
Brothers in Hollywood. Yeah, it was really neat. It was
Yeah.
so cool to like do the pitch.
Oh, I bet.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I can tell this story. I think this is a really funny story. So, it was Megan, myself, and then I forget his name, but he was our business development guy. He's very smart. So we went to CBS to do this pitch for one of their properties,
Hmm.
and so we were working with this guy, and he said, "Oh, actually, my boss wants to hear the pitch. He's really interested in it." And we were going to do, like, Megan would introduce the company, then I would introduce the creative treatment, like, this is what our vision is for the game using this
Yeah.
property, um, the biz div guy would say, "Okay, well, here's the deal that we'd make." So we get into this, like, high mucky muck corner office in New York City,
Hmm.
and he's like, "I just have 5 minutes." He's like, "I got to make a call to the coast. I just got 5 minutes." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so like stereotypical of like, I've got 5 minutes and the secretary is
Yeah.
gonna come in, and if we're
Yeah.
syncing, he'll be
Yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah,
I
for
got to
sure.
call the coast." I was like, I can't believe that. And I'm like, I thought it was a joke at first, but
Oh,
I thought he was
really?
like serious.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is so
Yeah.
funny.
So then Megan starts, getting into, describing like the company. The guy's like, "We heard that, we know that. Like, move on. What's a treatment? What are you gonna give us?" And so I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's my turn." And so I start, talking about like the treatment, the opening, and they like shut up. Like these two, CBS executive guys are just like really like entranced in everything. And so they're like, "Great." And they're like, "What's the deal? What are you gonna give us?" And so the biz dev guy talked about it, and then the secretary, yeah, when I was giving my pitch, the secretary came in and she's like, "You got to call on the coast," and he's like, "Tell him I'm busy. I'll call him later." And I'm like, "I can't,
That
I
is
can't believe
awesome.
this. It's like straight out of like a really bad like script or something.
I
Like,
know.
give us something else. Like,
Yeah, exactly. That's
my wife
brilliant.
is really sick, or I don't
Yeah.
know, but
That's like
like it was,
that's like a skit you'd see in the office, the
I
show.
know, I know, I know.
Oh,
And
that is awesome.
I always wanted to put in a game, but there's just never an opportunity to finish that.
Right. Actually, on that topic, was there any games that you wanted to make while you were there, or that you thought would be like a really cool idea, or a place Nancy would go that just never happened?
Yeah. There were some. Um, there's always a lot of ideas. Like we had tons of ideas. Um, for Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, I came up with this idea of like being able to like play hiding and go seek with like
Oh,
another player.
nice.
And then the other thing that we always talked about was like building like like a platform, like a game design, like a game system, where
Okay.
not only to allow us to be able to scale the development of the games,
Mm-hmm.
but also allow like people, like players, to make their own content as well,
Oh,
like
cool.
Nance Drew game in a box or something like
Yeah.
that. So those are ideas that I was really interested in moving forward with. But again, like I said, we saw ourselves as a content company, not a technology company, and
Right.
that would have required more investment in tech than we were willing to do.
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Was there a game that you guys launched that you maybe and your team thought would do really well or may not do really well, but then ended up being like a fan favorite or maybe not so much a fan favorite?
Or not so much a fan favorite.
Like was there a game that you thought would do great but then didn't, or was there a game you thought would not do great but then just excelled? Blackmore Manor aside.
Um, I mean, we always had aspirations. Like every time we'd release a game, it was like sending out your child to the world or something like that. You wanted them to make a good impression. Um, I think one that surprised me was Secret of the Scarlet Hand. Um, I I I I I in hindsight, I now see why there was critique, because of the repetitive, and there is a lot of hoops that you had to jump
Mm-hmm.
through multiple times. Um, but I don't know. I was for me, I thought the story was really interesting, and the end is just really bizarre as well.
Yeah.
So I think I was kind of expecting a better reception than what we got. But in hindsight, I now understand what the faults were of that game.
Right. Uh, Earlier on in the interview, you mentioned that there were some moments that you remember, or some games that you remember just having some really, like you guys were struggling to get through the game, and it just was a tough point. Were there some strong moments that stuck out where you're just like, oh man, we're never gonna get through this, or did you ever think the series would just end at some point?
Um, I mean, we always knew there was going to be some sort of end game, but it just wasn't in sight. Like,
Mm.
um, the fans appeared to want more, um, and um, we were able to continue with the series as well. I think early on there were definitely doubts, especially with Secrets Can Kill. There were a lot of doubts. It was very hit or miss. But we got really good press.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that happened with Secrets Can Kill was Amazon.
Oh right, yeah.
So, Amazon was starting to branch out beyond just books. And we said, hey, we've got this computer game, and it's based on a book property. And, it uses technology, uses computers.
Mm-hmm.
We think it would be a good fit. And it was, for Amazon at that time. It did do well for Amazon. So I think the press and the opportunities in electronic distribution through Amazon, to have essentially a store, right, that would promote you,
Mm-hmm.
and make your games available, and the fans as well, uh, was the kind of the kindling that started the fire,
Mm-hmm.
to get us to the point where we were able to make this a sustaining business. Um, and then I think Message in the Haunted Mansion then was the watershed, because
Mm-hmm.
then we got a New York Times review. It was very strong. It did very well. We were able to get into retail. So up until Message in the Haunted Mansion, was very difficult to sell in retail. We started making deals in other retail outlets, like your department stores.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think at that time too, we just had a really strong team, like Carolyn Goodwin, Bickford at that time, who was our sales and marketing person, Neil, I forget his name, who was our business development person, Megan is the CEO, and then all of the leads within the production, from Laura Henyon, to Tim, to Max Holacek, Aaron, everyone who was there
Mm-hmm.
involved in production, were just very strong. So we had a very strong team cohesion. We were very focused on doing the best that we could, and we were able to hit it out of the park.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So you left. We're gonna jump a little farther ahead. So you left the company in 2011, correct? Or was it 2012?
I think it was 2012, like the
Okay.
beginning of 2012.
And so what can you say what spurred that decision? Or if it was a very difficult one, or was it like, I'm
Uh,
just ready to
uh,
leave?
uh, Actually, it was pretty easy. The decision was made for me, so I was essentially laid off
Oh,
at
really?
that time. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, would you ever consider, if you ever were given the chance, would you ever consider to go back?
No, no,
No.
no. I had my time there, so I think it wouldn't provide any value for the company
Right.
right now. I say just give someone else the opportunity to work on these games.
Nice. Uh, did you ever play any of the games that were released after you had left?
No,
No, you didn't. Okay.
no, no.
Um, do you still follow the company at all today? Do you follow what they're doing?
I don't. So I'm still friends with some of the former employees.
Hmm.
So sometimes talk will lead to what's happening in the company, but I haven't heard anything for I don't know 6 months. I heard that so I knew that they were working on a game for like 5 years,
Yeah, I think
6 years,
it took them about 4.5 years to come
four and a half
out.
years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I guess it came out.
Yeah, so bit of a story there. So that they did have a bit of a layoff in 2015, and they Lonnie Manella was part of the layoff, and so there
Mm,
was a lot of like concern with the fans and all that stuff. The game finally released in December of last year. It didn't get a great reception, mostly
mm,
because it was pretty much entirely outsourced. And so I actually, when I asked listeners for questions to ask you, like the most common one and the one that was like the top of the list was, what does he think of the company now, and
mm.
what does he think of the new game? And I had a feeling that you might not have played it yet or even at all, but yeah,
Well,
it's
here's an idea for another show. You could do a walkthrough, and I can provide running
that would be
commentary.
brilliant. I haven't done the walkthrough for that game yet, so I'll let you know when I do
Okay.
that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's very different from the way the games used to be made. Uh,
Mm.
and I'm actually that would be brilliant to have you on. I'd be really curious to see what you'd think of all of it, and comparing it to how the games were made for sure. Um,
Sure. Sure. Yeah,
so
I'm curious to see what they did. So
yeah, well, one of the
yeah.
biggest things is that it's
I
everything's being rendered in real time. It's a full
Cool.
3D world now. I think like the
Nice.
general idea is great, but it's just I think they just needed more time.
Yeah, yeah. There was always a struggle with us because we were 2D, 2D game, and everything rendered in 2D surface
Hmm.
for the most part. And there was always constant push of like, when are you going to make a new engine? From press. That was always the question we had to field in press. And then also the board was asking it too. But the problem, at least in the early days, was with resolution. Like we couldn't
Hmm.
get the level of detail that we wanted in a 3D game.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I think even now, and then even now, it could be expensive to do that as well. 2D can be very easy and fast, but there's trade-offs too. I mean, the nice
Hmm.
thing about 3D is the reusability of assets. You can use someone else's engine, but I guess you see 4.5 years of production work to get to that point.
Hmm.
As I understood, they're using Unity or
Yes. Yeah.
an out-of-the-box engine, so you didn't really have to do a significant investment in at least your core technology. Um, so, yeah, and I'm curious, what now with today's technology compared to like 1998. I'm curious about the quality and resolution of the visuals.
Well, that's actually one of the biggest complaints with the new game is that
Uh,
it just doesn't hit the mark with and I think part of that too is when it released, even today it still isn't perfectly optimized for computers. It's I've got a pretty decent computer, and I still can't run it at high settings on full screen. I've got to do it in a windowed mode, and it doesn't look the greatest. And there are, in some scenes, there are clearly areas where it's been unfinished. Like you'll be walking down the street, you'll just look to the left a bit, and then the street just goes, and there's like the sky there and no houses or anything.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
and I think that's when people first played the new game, that just hit them right away. They're just like, this just doesn't look good. And again, when you have a game that's constantly rendering a 3D environment, 3D characters, all that stuff, all at one time, compared to the old games where it was just 2D pre-rendered scenes. I mean, it's still rendering those scenes, but they were 3D environments that were pre-rendered, and they looked super good. And they got better with every game. And so shifting from that to the new game was a huge jolt for a lot of fans. And so that's
Mm.
yeah. So I would be really curious to see what you think of it for sure when that
Yeah.
happens. Um,
Yeah, and again, that was the reason why we didn't want to go in 3D, because in a 3D world, like the environment's background compared to some sort of action element, whereas in the Nancy Drew games, it's all about the details of the environment. The
mhm.
environment is the character, a very important character within the game, and so it was imperative that we be able to have a medium in which we could render high details of
Mhm.
the visuals.
Yeah, for sure. So all the games that you guys made, even up till before the layoffs happened in 2015, they were all in. None of them were HD. I'll put it that way. They were all in the 4:3 or 4:3 aspect ratio, and never 16:9. Was there ever any talks of going full screen, or was it always just to have it in that smaller resolution?
Yeah, there was always talk. So Art definitely wanted to have a larger resolution, and then the problem was there were two problems. So the first was just the tech ability to support that,
Yeah.
um, support that rendering, as well as storage as well,
Oh yeah, for sure.
because the larger so again, all of these assets, each of these views is an asset, and so if you increase the resolution size and you're increasing the size of every asset, and that can take a significant amount of space. So that was problematic for. So I think we did the computation to determine what we could fit on a DVD, and then also we wanted to be able to provide digital downloads as well. And
Hmm.
so if we had large assets, that would make the download size too large.
Right. Would that have extended the amount of time it would take to make a game too? Because if you're rendering larger images, would that increase the time at all, or was that not a worry?
Yeah. So definitely it would have increased the time, and we had rendering farms set up to render out
Hmm.
like animations and 3D environments. So there'd probably be some sort of like call them IMR cost in my current role, just the infrastructure cost.
Okay, yeah. Um, we're gonna go back a little bit again here. So I've heard rumors. I don't know if this is. I've never been able to confirm this. But I've heard rumors that supposedly Secret of the Old Clock was supposed to be the last game in the series, or there was some license that was about to end at that time. And I don't know. That's just something I've heard on like a wiki. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah. So every so HeR Interactive licensed the rights to make computer games featuring Nancy Drew from Simon Schuster, which at the time I think still is the property holder.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a contract, right? It was a licensing contract that had would need to be renewed every so often. And I think at the beginning it was like every game or something
Oh
horrific, and
wow.
so it was always like a song and dance to go back to New York to talk it through.
Mhm.
Um, and we finally negotiated more of a long-term contract, and so it may be that at that time of Secrets Can Kill, or sorry, Secret of the Old Clock, that we were in contract negotiations again.
Okay.
Um, but there was always the risk that we were going to lose it,
Of
or that
course.
the terms would not be um, feasible for us. But I think overall, like, I think Simon Schuster understood that we were um, we were good partners,
Mhm.
and that we were also providing good benefit to them as well. I believe they licensed out. I think they licensed out maybe to another company, or maybe the Hardy Boys or something like that. They gave the
Right.
license to like Dreamcatcher, I think. I think in a way they tested out the waters with another company, and I think maybe their experience led them to realize HeR Interactive at least was a good partner.
Right, for sure, for sure. So I want.
But there was always that like sort of Damocles hanging over our heads. Like there's always this like feeling like this is gonna be the last one, or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But again, I think once we hit like Curse of Blackmore Manor, we started hitting our Elvis year. Once we were able to actually fund the spin-offs, um, then we got to a good point.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Was there any of the games that you had hoped you would, or you had wanted to try out on a new platform? Because I know Tomb of the Lost Queen was in Kickstarter for to be ported to mobile in
Oh,
2012, I think. But was there any other of the games that you wanted to try out on other platforms, or?
no, no, I was always very resistant about doing a straight port. I always felt that we had to design for the medium
Okay,
if we wanted to use the game or content. And then I always question like, well, if this experience is available in one medium, like what's the benefit of going to another medium? Why don't we just create something new?
I see.
Um,
Yeah.
because then you're always going to get this comparison of like, well, it's not like the PC game,
Hmm.
um, and I feel like here we're probably going to have to do a lot of redesign anyway. So
Right.
let's just make something new.
For sure.
Um,
Okay. Um, Kind of on that topic, so you guys didn't start developing the games for Mac until around 2010, I think it was. Um, was there any want earlier in the series to go for Mac, or what? Did you just want to stay with PC, or what sort of? Do you know what sort of caused that decision there?
yeah, so Macs started becoming more and more popular. Um, in the
Oh,
early
right, yeah.
days, Mac didn't have as much of the penetration as PCs did,
Hmm.
but then it started catching up with PC, and then also the technology was there to be able to do an easy port. So the architecture of the Macs allowed them to port um, PC apps a lot more easily.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna do one final question before going into the remainder of the listener questions here, and then we'll probably wrap her up. But what looking back at all the games that you worked on and all the time you spent at HeR Interactive, what what do the games mean to you as a whole? When you think about them, do they mean like that was an amazing part of my life? Do they mean like, oh man, I just I'm glad to be done with those days, or?
Uh, um, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a seminal period in my life and career. And you said something like people are still playing the games,
Oh
which I
yeah.
just think is crazy to be able to work on something that not only had an impact then, but also has an impact now. Is just is just a very strange and humbling experience. What it meant to me at that time was um, having the opportunity or having the platform, not only to tell like a really cool story and to share what I find interesting in the world. So there was pretty much in all the games I left some sort of signature, like something I
Mm.
found interesting or of um, of interest from the world. Um, but also I think it's um, what we really wanted to do with the series was to um, give the player a sense of something else, right? Another part of the world, another person's life, another experience, and and to flesh these situations and locations and historical characters out,
Mm-hmm.
to provoke more curiosity about, well, who were these people,
Right.
or what is outside my door. And I remember a classroom like um, sent like a letter to
Yeah.
us, and they said, we're so bummed when the Nancy Drew game is over, because then there's no other mysteries to solve. And I said, you can be like Nancy Drew,
Oh
right?
yeah.
There's thousands of mysteries just right outside your doorstep.
Yeah.
Put your Nancy Drew cap on and start looking at the world in a way that Nancy would look at.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like it was a really cool venue or platform, for me to kind of toot my horn about what I feel about the world. And I remember um, there was a conference that was led by this teacher, who was very interested in technology, and he said, you people who develop these games like have an enviable role. Like, you're essentially master teachers for
Right.
hundreds of thousands, millions of people out there. And I thought, like, oh gosh, pressure's on. um, it's like, it's just not like fun and games. Like,
Yeah.
this actually has implications to what we're doing. And as a result, like, we were very careful about the content. Like, one thing that I felt very strongly about was about sarcasm.
Okay.
Like, it's really easy to be cynical, and kids get to an age where they will be cynical.
Right. Yeah.
But I really wanted to stray away from cynicism, because I just thought, like, there's going to be loads of opportunities to be cynical,
Of course.
and it's easy to go there. And instead, like, let's just have fun in this strange world that we're making.
Yeah, for sure. Oh well, again, and I will say this all the time because I grew up with these games. I started playing them when I was, I think, 4, uh,
Wow.
back in 2005, and it was a game changer because I think the first game I played was Stay Tuned for Danger, and it was just, that was like, this is awesome, this is so cool, and I just and then my friend gave me like 5 games, and I just, now I've got like multiple copies of a few of the games because I've just been collecting them over the years. But
But stay tuned. Like, I don't know. Like, it's very goofy. I think it's one of the silliest games we ever put
right.
together. Um, but yeah, just I don't know. I cringe whenever I think of Stay Tuned, because
Really?
because it was like the first game that I was
Oh yeah, because you were
that
there
I
from the
that I
start to
was
beginning.
developing from like start to beginning, and then I wrote the script. Sorry,
Oh, you did, eh? Oh,
because
cool.
we had no script writer, right? So it was like,
Right.
oh, okay, I guess I'll write it. And just like
Wow.
I
Yeah.
remember like the Laura Henyon, the creative director, like editing my script. She's like, it's so cliche, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not a writer.
Oh, that's
But
great.
although I think Stay Beautiful, like, I think that's one of my most favorite like buys.
I was just gonna bring that up.
Like,
Yeah, no, it's it's a fan favorite, and it's stuck around for ages. Oh man. Yeah, well, actually, oh, I think it was 2016. Her Interactive started. They started live streaming the games. I think, like, every month or something. And so whenever they get to a certain game, there'd be a few of them live streaming it. Then they'd come up with a catchphrase to use, like just a quote in the game at the end of as an outro to the stream. And when I got to Stay Tuned for Danger, it was Stay Beautiful, and they'd always go like Stay Beautiful. And it was brilliant. So yeah, having written something small like that, it's stuck with people for
Yeah.
ages. Yeah. But
Yeah, and I don't even know where that came from. It just felt like a Rick thing to
yeah,
do. Like yeah.
that's
And that
great.
was, that was fun, like creating these characters because they would just like take off. Like,
Oh yeah.
they would start writing the script, and then you're just standing back and watching it happen. It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, no, a lot of the characters are super in depth, and I feel like they actually were. Okay, I'm not just talking about Stay Tuned for Danger, just like the entire series as a whole. They're just super well made, and so many of them are so memorable. Like Professor Hotchkiss is one that just stands out in people's minds as like that is one of the best characters in the whole series. Tino Balducci
Yeah.
is like one that fans are just like, I hate him, but I love him at the same time, and yeah, there's a whole plethora. It's awesome.
Yeah, Hotchkiss was fun. So that was Carrie Healy, a wonderful
Yeah.
actor, but she's kind of known in town as being a director and writer. We actually
Okay.
got a lot of good voice actors from her, like Stephen Hando and
Oh
Rob,
yeah.
who played one of the Hardy Boys. I think Jonah Van Sprecken as well,
Okay.
that we
Cool.
used a lot. So yeah, she was fun to work with. And the other funny thing with like Hotchkiss was like the behind the door thing with the
Oh yeah.
eyeball. Like it was our way to like get more conversation out without actually the
Okay.
cost of animation. Like we're
Oh, of
always
course.
looking for like ways to like, how can we get more conversation
Right.
without animating. So behind the doors, telephone,
Right.
masks,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like,
With yeah, Henrik. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
brilliant. That's so cool.
yeah.
All the little things always counted. I just think the small little bits, little details, just they make the games just shine everywhere. But yeah, oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna head into the listener questions now because there are not that many, but there's a couple of them. And again, the biggest one being, what do you think of the company now, and the direction it's headed in, and all that stuff. But another one that's come up is, what is your favorite and least favorite game?
Yeah, so we talked about it before. Curse of Blackmore Manor is definitely my favorite. There's uh, it all the things that kind of inspired me as a kid went into that game. Uh, and then the whole idea of this kind of lineage, this
Mm.
this handing down for every other generation,
Mm-hmm.
was kind of neat. Like it felt kind of magical and interesting to think about, your place in the present, but also your impact on the future.
Right.
Was kind of cool. And I think it's Eleanor. I think there's like, yeah, there's like this where you can read like each of the predecessors kind of comments. And
I think, well, there's the family tree where you can click on a
yeah,
name and then Jane will like tell you the history of that person or something. I don't know if that's what you're
but I
thinking of.
thought I thought there's like, I don't know, I thought there was like a manual or something where like each of the predecessors got to write something, and like Eleanor wrote something like, I wish I could know you and see what your world was like, or something like that. Maybe it got cut. I
Hmm.
don't know.
Well,
Um,
there in the forge in the basement there are all those books that were written by some very past members of the family. I don't know if
yeah,
that
yeah.
might be part of
Maybe
it.
that was and people don't read those. I don't read them. But
I know.
it was fun to put together.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No,
Um,
I'm one to just sort of like get onto the puzzles and just cruise through the games pretty quickly for sure.
yeah.
Was there
And then Haunted Mansion was fun too, to create like a spooky mansion.
right?
So it
Yeah.
was neat.
Well, I was even on your I did a bit of research on your blog Electric Rest. I read that your post about Haunted Mansion. You said that
No,
was the one
that's
that always sort of stuck in your mind as a favorite of yours for working on, and just bringing up the fact that it was developing this haunted mansion with the spooky ghosts and all that stuff, little voices everywhere was fun, and that's for a lot of people that was their first game, and that's
yeah,
what got them hooked. So I think
yeah,
that was a
yeah.
winner.
And then least favorites, it's Secret of Shadow Ranch for iPad, iOS. Just
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
will
good.
apologize for this. Yeah, like so much went wrong with that.
Really?
Um, yeah, I mean the original vision was it to be like a true like choose your own adventure kind of deal where you would have different paths throughout the game, throughout the reading experience, and it'd be very much more rich than it actually was.
Hmm.
So we for a variety of reasons, there was just no ability to actually create that dependency structure like we had for the engine.
Hmm.
There's a lot of just limitation in terms of the artwork and puzzles. So yeah, yeah. And again, that it felt like we were trying to port a game to this medium, and there was this conflict between like port versus designing for that medium.
Right.
But yeah, I apologize profusely for that one. Sorry.
I actually enjoy. I remember when
Yeah.
I first bought it, I was stoked. It's like this is the coolest thing, new game, and I think I finished it in about 2 or 3 days when I first got it.
Yeah.
But I guess that's probably why the next Castle Finster never took off. Then, hey, the sequel to it.
It could be. Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I wasn't part of that decision.
Right. Okay. Okay. Next one comes from Nancy Drew 66, and she's got two questions. One was, what was your favorite part about working at HeR Interactive? And if you could go back in time, what would you change, and what would you not change?
What's my favorite part? I think it was yeah. So some things that come to mind are just our committee meetings where we would get together and start brainstorming, where we'd actually be walking through the game and defining spots and opportunities for puzzles, for narrative elements, character development, all that stuff. Again, it was just bringing together all these really smart and brilliant people together, and hearing them riff off on ideas and riff
Right.
off on
Yeah.
each other, and just the conversations that were had were hilarious. So that's one thing I like. And then we also in the early days we did retreats, so we would go out
Oh, cool.
to like celebrate. So I remember for Message of Haunted Mansion, we went to Manresa Castle in Port
Okay.
Townsend
Yeah.
on the coast of the Olympic Peninsula. Port Townsend is this old coast, like a harbor town.
Okay. Yeah.
It has all these like old Victorian mansions, and there's like
Oh,
this
cool.
vampire LARP that happens there, or something like that.
Cool.
But before, so I got there a day before, and I scoured the whole town for like interesting things and clues.
Yeah.
And so one activity we did was a scavenger hunt where people got into teams and had to go scour the whole region to find these things and take pictures to show that they were there, or like write down information, and then they had to come back and present what they found and do a performance. So there were
Oh,
like
brilliant.
performance related questions, and it was just hilarious what people were doing. Like one of the performances was that you had to reenact the witches scene from Macbeth. It's very, very goofy. So
Nice.
just these like moments of goofiness that would always happen at like 1 a.m. when you're trying to like build
Oh
something.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
And then if I could go back and change anything, I think I talked about this already, was just putting more investment into technology, so then we could scale what we were working on and developing,
Hmm.
and create a game system where we could reuse assets, and build faster and bigger,
Right.
and then also allow people to make their own adventures.
Would you have uh would you have kept the team size the same as it was, or would you have wanted to increase it or decrease it at any point in time?
What I would have done is to create a small team to work just on iterating on something new,
Hmm.
uh, and completely new, something that still had the kind of spirit of the Nancy Drew games, but weren't necessarily the Nancy Drew games.
Okay, okay. So the next one comes from Madison, and she's wondering, she is interested to know what your role was in the creative process, what the creative, this is a bit of a long one, what the creative environment was like, how did the game creators slash developers slash writers slash actors bounce their ideas off each other and collaborate to reach the final product. So essentially, what was the creative process like?
Sure. So in the early days, we would all read Nancy Drew books, and then we would make pitches in terms of like, hey, I think this is, what we should do. We like filled out like forms, like how
Oh,
many
nice.
characters, what were the interesting characters, locations, stuff like that. So we would go through together as a team to make a decision on what we would do. And then as I said, we would all get together and just start talking about like, okay, it starts off this way, and then this happens, there's these environments, et cetera, et cetera. So once we kind of got like a skeleton of the flow of the game, we would also mark out like what was an environment, make sure environments weren't too large or too small, and then we'd have to fill out an environment if it's too small, or take things out of an environment if it's too large. We would define puzzles, and then people would go off. It's usually me or Laura Henyon would go off to define like what does that puzzle look like, what's the logic behind it, what are the different difficulty levels, how does it
Mm-hmm.
work, et cetera, et cetera. And then once we had kind of this design document listing out what was in the environment, what was in the puzzles, how the puzzles work, then each of the respective people would work on their areas. So scriptwriter writes script, artists would start building the art, and then the scripters would start putting this together. The developer would write the puzzle code, support any new features that we had, and animators would start animating the characters. Um, they would start with modeling, and so the script had to be done pretty fast
Mm-hmm.
ahead of animation, because we had to get the voiceovers recorded before animation could do the lip syncing. And our voiceover artists were contracts, so
Right.
they were just actors that we would bring in, and it was kind of weird for them because they weren't doing conversing with someone
Mm-hmm.
else. They would just be there alone in the studio for an hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
reading all these responses. We'd usually give them cue lines. I would usually read the cue line for them to give them a sense of how to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And the scriptwriter would be listening for making sure that the delivery was correct. In the early days, we farmed out animation. We
Right.
contracted out for animation, but then later we brought it in and have a lot more control. Um, and then all throughout the process, we would be working with our advisory panel, the ad pan,
Right.
um, to just get feedback on our thoughts in terms of the concept, in terms of the script, in terms of the puzzles, in terms of the environments, and use that feedback to course correct if needed. And then once we got to beta, we would start beta testing, and then there would be several weeks where we'd be responding to beta testing and fixing bugs. And then there would be an overlap between that time and when we were actually starting design work on the next game. And then when we switched from kind of design by committee to having a dedicated person who was like the showrunner
Mm-hmm.
or the designer, they would be coming up with the overall vision for the product, for the story, with inputs from the different leaders like myself or the creative director. And then they would also be responsible for defining like how puzzles would work. And then sometimes, depending on just resourcing, other people would also pitch in and defining like how puzzles would work.
Right. Okay. Uh, I got two questions based on that. So, when you guys brought in your own character, or when you moved the character animation into in-house instead of outsourcing that, did that allow for more animation within the budget?
Yep, it
Okay.
definitely did, especially cinematics.
Right.
So we had like we had a system that enabled us to make um, um, character animation, just voiceover, where they're just a kind of a talking head and moving all
Right.
around. We had a system early on that allowed um, for easy development of that. It
Hmm.
still did take time, but uh, there there wasn't a lot of animation there. Whereas an environmental cinematic required a lot more time,
Right.
and then also was dependent on the 3D environment and props being created. So that just allowed us for greater flexibility to start the animation process earlier on, because the
Right.
animators then could work with the artists, 3D artists, to define lighting and structure of the environments as well. And I think you could tell when we started moving on, because just the animations were the cinematics were much more rich and
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's I think it was White Wolf that you guys transitioned to an in-house character animator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, in the early design process, what would you guys what was like sort of inside the limit of how much you could include in a game in regards to how big an environment was and how many characters you would include in a game?
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb was like, think something like 8 environments or and 4 animated characters. And again, we looked for all these different ways to skirt around that,
Hmm.
by people behind doors, telephone characters, whatever, behind that restriction on animation. Also, animation was expensive in terms of storage at that time too,
Right.
as well as
Yeah.
cinematics, so that had to be reduced. Um, and then 8 environments, because we divvied up milestones into like milestone 1 and milestone 2, or phase 1, phase 2.
Mm.
So we'd have 4 environments completed at the end of phase 1, to allow time for the scripters to put in all the good stuff in the environment.
Yeah.
um, and then the art director would define like the size of the environment. So when we came up with our list of stuff in there, then he would say, nope, that's too much, or we need some more in here. I think we also had like a sizing, like large, medium, small. So
Right.
we could do, yeah, we got more complex. So we could be like, we could have like 2 large and 2 mediums,
Yeah.
or 1 large and 3 mediums and 1 small. So there was always horse trading in terms of like what we can get done. And the designers were always like upset, like, I want more. And the art would be like, no, you can't. But the art team would always look for ways to like get something in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And then I'd always go crazy, because I'm like, if you had time, I would have, wanted to know, so we could do this other clue.
yeah.
Instead, we got like, fish spinning around in a pool, but that's okay. It's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, I think a great example of that is in Shadow at the Water's Edge, where you've got. I'd consider the Ryokan to be a pretty massive environment because you've got
Yeah,
all the halls as well as I don't know how many rooms, like 40 rooms or something. Although most rooms were pretty much the same, that's
right.
still rendering out all the rooms because each room I think was just a slightly different color or lighting than the other.
Yeah,
And so navigating all that plus the gardens plus the baths and then taking the train to the pachinko parlor or then going over to the expo center. So yeah, I think that's a great example of showing you've only got 3 environments in that, but at the same time there's smaller ones within those bigger ones, and they're all packed with so much for sure.
yeah, yeah. And the art team was great. Building out those environments, and I remember for Danger by Design, right, set in
Hmm.
Paris.
Yeah.
Um, when the artists were creating the park, with the sculptures and things like that. That's an actual place in the
Yeah.
Cité, the Square Very Galant. And I remember, we're just like looking at pictures on the internet. And then I actually got to go to Paris
No
soon
way.
after it released, and I went to the park. And I'm like, whoa, they got it! It was so spot on. Like
That's fascinating.
they really hit that mark
That's
good.
so cool.
Like,
Yeah, because I've seen pictures of fans going and taking pictures at the same park, and they're just like, "Look where I am!" And it's another place I'd love to try and make my way to one day, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Was there a location that, when it was done, you felt was just the coolest thing, and that you would want to go there if it were real?
Um, yeah, real life is always better.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who does a lot of traveling and going outside
Hmm.
and exploring different locations. So it's nothing like the real thing.
Right.
Although there are some really beautiful environments like the ghost dog. When I was watching you play that, I was like, yeah, it's pretty.
Oh yeah.
It's
It's a
a
pleasant
nice.
place.
Yes, yes. And I remember doing the sound design on that, like,
Okay.
finding the angry porcupine sound and all the bird calls. And, you know, it's kind of loud because I
Yeah.
was very proud of the sounds. And that's also one of my favorite soundtracks too. Like we
Oh
did the
yeah.
day and night thing, which was kind of costly, but
Yeah.
it was fun to like play with a day theme and a night theme
Hmm.
for the different locations. um so I think that's one. The Phantom Venice was really cool to be in some sort of like palazzo.
Hmm.
um and again, I think the sound design was neat for that game too.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think that's another thing that I thought was so well thought out and so well done in the games was just listening to the games. There's in some cases there's not a lot of audio playing at one time, but what is playing usually is just perfect to get you in that world, and it's been great. There was a lot of, I think Alibi and Ashes is another great example of that. Is when you're driving around town, and if you're like at the antique store and then you go up to Nancy's house, there's a clear sound change of being by the river at the antique store and then moving into this more urban but then still sort of nature area where Nancy's house is. And it was just like a nice little, I always look forward to it. Actually, even when I just played it the other day, I was just like, I like just going between these places just to hear this sound change and hear the noises that are going on in the town and whatnot. um
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it's,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, we never had a dedicated sound designer, at least in the games that I was working on. It was always the
Really?
scripters. It was always the scripters that, you own an environment,
Yeah.
you gotta put your sound effects in from this like sound library, sound
Okay,
effects
cool.
library. And then later on, we hired a scripter who was very talented in coding, and he actually made significant enhancements to our sound engine, that piggybacked on the transition to Lua.
Okay,
So
cool.
I think Alibi may have been, yeah, I think that's when we may have transitioned, completed the transition at least to Lua.
Okay.
So we had a lot more versatility with how we could manage sound.
Interesting. I love hearing this behind the scenes stuff. It's so great. It's stuff like I've been just dreaming about.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it was always funny, like whenever like fans would come and do a tour of the office,
right.
because it's just an office. It's just people at a
Yeah.
computer.
Yeah.
It's the most, they're expecting, I don't know, like Hogwarts or something, but it's like, yeah, we're just in
Yeah.
cubicles, just with headphones on,
Yeah.
hanging out. So I'd always have to be like, but here's like where all of our Nancy Drew books are in the
Yeah.
library, and here's all the games, and that was it. Like, you can have lunch with Megan, right? I don't know.
Right.
That's, we don't have anything else to offer. Like,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
you asked about mementos, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
what? Like, we kind of did this Twyla Tharp thing, the choreographer. So she wrote this book about like the creative process, and she's like, when I work on a project, she's like, I get a box, and
Yeah.
everything that I find about the topic or anything goes in the box. So we kind of did this. We had these boxes where we would put the stuff, like the books or any memorabilia, and so
Right.
it was important to like maintain those boxes to have all the stuff. So I didn't really take anything, but the two mementos that I have
Oh, I'm
from
ready for
my
this.
time in Interactive, you'll never guess.
I probably won't. No.
It's an air purifier. so, so when we moved into our new office space, and this island that's actually sinking.
Yeah.
It's like in this slough.
Oh, that place. Yeah.
There was all this, like, I don't know, people were freaking out about like pollen or fungus or something like that. So we got a whole bunch of air purifiers to
Oh my
purify
word.
it, and then once the air is pure, there wasn't any reason to use them.
Oh,
And
that is
then
fantastic.
the other thing is not really, I guess these are mementos for me, is my design books.
Oh my word.
Some my grand grimoires of just like this is what I would use, like, when I was just kind of like coming up with like ideas, like here's the prototype for Bull
No
from
way.
Scarlet Hand. um what else do I got? Here's the dog puzzle on the mantle from
Oh, from
Ghost
Ghost Dogs.
Dogs.
Oh, that's so
um
cool.
so and then my favorite, what is it? Oh yeah. So this was my notes about like just like generating ideas for Curse of Blackmore Manor. So like
Oh, oh, that's hilarious.
like here's a reference to Die Monster Die, which is
Right.
kind of the inspiration. It was this horrible 60s horror film, which was the inspiration. So I thought like, oh, we could start out with Die Monster Die, where like Nancy's making her way through the town and they're all like, no, you can't, you're going to Blackmore Manor, bah. Dead mystery writer, creepy old lady in wheelchair,
I love that.
absent husband, which we did,
Yeah.
butler, no, shrouded figure, kind of stepchild, no. Um, so, so
Oh.
that's all I got is the air purifier, and I absconded with my design book. Sorry,
Well, I
I could
am.
say like they were, I wrote them on
Oh
in
yeah.
my own
Oh,
time.
see,
And
for me, I am such a huge. As of late, I've been so interested in the development of the games and all the behind the scenes. I actually have just recently finished going through all the game files that were included in the games.
you're
Just
kidding.
I'm serious. I've been so dead set on finding stuff. Like whenever I'd see something that wasn't finished, like sometimes some of the games had little screen or scenes that weren't finished, and I was interested right away. I was like, that is the coolest thing. And so seeing that book, I'm like, I'm getting giddy. I'm like, I want to read it. Like there's just to me that is just the coolest thing. And so yeah, that is just so cool. That is so
Well,
cool.
we should do like walkthroughs where like
Oh man,
like they do the like DVD commentary, like
that would be
get a
brilliant.
couple of us on Zoom or something
Oh
and just
yeah,
like walk through and start just riffing off of
that
like
would be.
how this came across or
Oh
what was
yeah.
happening or like I don't remember this at all.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
that'd be so cool. Yeah.
um, yes. I can't believe you're actually, so you're looking at the source files, is that
So like
right?
I just used just the rad bink video tools or whatever that program is, and I
Okay.
just when because the first 32 games you can easily access all the video and sound files after you install the
Right.
game.
Right. Right.
And so I just sort of went in there. I love digging around and just seeing because there are video and sound files in the games that didn't make the cut but were still just sort of left over. And so
Yeah.
I've always found seeing that stuff is just so interesting. And I actually have managed to get my hands on a couple of I think the beta versions of games 29 to 32, and even just like playing through those, it's just so interesting to see, what at the time between that time and the release, what was finished and what wasn't finished, and it's such a cool thing personally to see that development.
Do people access the diagnostic tool in the game?
Like the little cheat menu.
Yeah.
Uh, I think Michael Gray leaked that quite a few years ago, and then
Okay.
HeR Interactive sort of shut him down, and then
Oh, really?
yeah, because they were just like it's just an internal thing, and then all of a sudden everyone was like so interested in it. I go in there quite often actually. I just again it's just I love seeing what I can do just to sort
Right.
of
Right.
break the game.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple stuff that I think that's hidden
Yeah, well there I know
in there.
in Stay Tuned for Danger, there's a little drawer in the desk in Maddie's apartment that is locked forever. You can't get the key unless you go into that cheat menu and retrieve the key. And
Okay.
so there's just, I think there are some smaller things like that. But then there are some moments where you can like give yourself, like in Trail of the Twister, like the max limit of paw pennies or
Right. Right.
uh, smaller things like that.
Yeah.
And that's really what I just use it for. Even turning off and on fast conversation in the earlier games is something that I figured out as well. But
Mm, mm, mm.
yeah, no, it's that did come out, and her Interactive wasn't a huge fan of that coming out, and so I don't know why. I think it's a brilliant tool, and it's just something
I,
fun to
I
play with.
I'm surprised it stayed secret for so long. Like, I just thought like, wow, it's gonna come out really, really, really early. I think we had like some sort of INI file that prevented you from accessing it. But yeah,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, no,
we
it.
we
Yeah, I think it's for me at least from what I've heard, it's super like very few people have had problems with it. I think in like the Phantom of Venice or something, you can't just access it super easily. You got to do it a few
mm,
times and then you can get
mm,
into it. Or you got to press them in some weird order. I don't know, but I've had trouble getting into it in that game.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, just small things like that is just. I've just found that very interesting. I've had people actually email me just like, "Yo, have you seen this or have you heard these sound files?" I don't know if you ever go on the subreddit for Nancy Drew at all, but
No.
there's people on there that'll be just like, just digging through the sound files, and here's like this whole like 8 minute video of unused audio or something in the game, and I'm like, that
Really?
is so cool. Yeah, it's
Wait, unused audio. Why did we put it in there? Like, that's
well, there was
making
one
so
there
much.
at the end of
What?
yeah, well, at the end of Treasure in the Royal Tower, there was actually like a full teaser trailer audio for the final scene that was never used.
Really? Sorry. Sorry for that extra space we took on
Oh,
your hard
it
drive.
hurts. No, it's so cool. I love seeing that stuff. It's such a fascinating thing. Um, anyway, sort of veering back on track here. This next question actually comes from a current HeR Interactive employee who, you remember Kalina Joyce, or Little Jackalope? She joined the team in 2010.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Kalina. Yep.
yeah. She has a question. She goes, she is
Why would
curious.
she have a question? I thought she knew everything
Well,
about
that's what
games.
I thought too. And when she commented on my post, I was like, oh, that's very interesting, but all right. Um, she was just wondering which games you designed and how your interests, hobbies, and education influenced those games, as well as just any other good stories that you've got.
So again, so participate in the design of Stay Tuned for Danger to Curse of Blackmore Manor as a committee member,
Right. Yeah.
and as scriptwriter, sound designer, puzzle meister, whatever. Um, um, so all of us designed it. I could call out like specific things that I designed. I
Mm-hmm.
tended to design the overall story working with the script writer. But again, it's hard to really define, like, there wasn't just one designer, right?
Right. Yeah.
um, there tended to be people who had stronger voices, like myself or Tim or Hanyan, the scriptwriter. So there's kind of the core that we're really pushing the design of the game. Um, and then with Curse of Blackmore Manor, then I took, it was at 10, I forget, was it 10 or no, Curse of, no, it was 11.
Yes, it was 11. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was 11. Yeah. So then we switched off. So it was either me or the um, creative director who would be essentially the lead designer
Right.
for the game. But then as my role as executive producer, I was essentially responsible for the overall direction and to ensure that the vision was strong. So I would work very closely with the creative director or designer. It's more kind of like an editing function
Right.
when they were owning that design, or take on something. But you could see my imprimatur in different places, like
Yeah.
Red Knot with birding,
Okay.
um,
Cool.
the whole die monster die feel,
Yeah.
from Curse of Blackmore Manor, like with the hand and the creepy person behind the bed.
Right. Yeah.
Um, um, and then a lot of things would just derive from like my experiences in traveling or research. So like with Secret Scarlet Hand, I learned a ton about the Maya culture.
Right.
With Haunting of Castle Malloy, like I went out to New Mexico to the Goddard lab to
Oh
find out
wow.
about early rocketry. Um, so usually like there'd be like some sort of interest that is either provoked by the game
Mm.
that I started getting into, or oh, I'm really interested in something that we'll put into the game. So yeah, so there's different parts of the game where it's clearly like an influence of someone on the team,
Right.
um, you know, or some sort of interest that they had that they put into the games or leveraged for design.
Right. Okay. And this
I hope
final,
that answers your question, Cleena.
I hope so.
I would have thought I would have thought you'd know, like
I
it
know.
was.
Yeah, no, I was surprised when she asked the question, but I guess although she did join the team in 2010, so there was quite a bit she obviously missed out on. But
Yeah. I mean, she was. I think she was a member of the ad panel
well,
early
she was. I
on.
think she joined the AdPan like early 2000s or something as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But yeah, essentially answer the question. Like it was committee. There was strong voices within the committee that was designing.
right.
I was responsible in the early days for script and putting together puzzles and stuff like that.
Mm.
And then we did this, lead designer kind of flip flop with me as executive producer and creative director, and then we hired a full time designer.
Okay. Cool. Cool. And the final question comes from, I don't know how to pronounce this. It's Mintechershock. It's spelled Mintecherchoc. And anyways, their question is a brilliant question, and it's I'd love to know how the research process, or I'd love to know about the research process to build the historical games. For example, how much travel was there? Did they talk to people who were experts in those areas, especially building some of those puzzles? And this person is actually has a history major and is a teacher, and is just curious from that perspective.
Cool. Let's see. So in the early days, we actually contracted with a woman who wrote her PhD dissertation on Nancy Drew.
Oh,
So
cool.
we used her services to just get a better sense of the brand. We read a lot of the stories, watched the old films, things like that. So in the early days, we wanted to do our homework on the brand itself. So we use both source material and then also an expert to
Okay.
understand the Nancy Drew brand. And then for the historical items, it depended on the games. A lot of times it was a lot of reading and research, specific books sometimes, lots of internet research. And then there are times when we would actually work with experts. Like with on a carousel, the team went down to, I think it's somewhere in Oregon, the Dalles maybe,
Okay.
where there's a carousel museum.
Oh,
So they
cool.
went there not only to gather visual information, but also to talk to the curators there. I mentioned I went to the Goddard Laboratory in New Mexico.
Right.
We normally wouldn't do that. I actually had to go to Mexico for another reason because American Laser Games started in Albuquerque, New Mexico,
Right.
and there was an old storage unit that they wanted closing down,
Oh, really?
and I was the only one left from the old days in Albuquerque, so I went down to actually clear out and then ship
Okay.
the remaining items out there. And there was sensitive stuff. So since I was an accountant, I was privy to that information
Mm.
already. So then I realized, I can go over to Roswell to go to the Goddard Museum.
Oh, that's so cool.
Um, let's see. So yeah, again, it depended on the on the topic. What another thing that we would do too is for our research is we would come up with a list of movies to get a sense of atmosphere. So I'm
Yeah.
looking through my notes. I listed, a lot of movies for reference, to get ideas. Um, and then the other thing that we started doing was kind of cultural sensitivities. So we would like hire someone to review the content to make sure it was sensitive to the culture. So like Haunting of Castle Malloy, we hired an Irish uh, historian. And I remember when he saw the leprechauns, he's like, no, no,
Oh man.
no. And we're like, oh no, it's already built.
Yeah.
Crap, what do we do here? He's like,
Oh,
yeah. He's like, that's bad.
that is so funny.
Like, yeah, I wish you wouldn't have done that. So I think then we started bringing experts in earlier on, just to check our work to make sure that we were being sensitive, but also identify opportunities because they knew nuances about the culture. But a lot of times it was just going to the library and doing a lot of research, which is awesome for the team, not only for the designer but also for the artists, to get a feel for authenticity in terms of the environments, and the artwork.
Right. Oh, cool. So yeah, I know that's something that was a really big deal for you guys, with having historically factual, accurate information, especially with Marie Antoinette and Treasure in the Royal Tower. That one is, again, that one keeps coming up in places that I come across where that was something that really stuck out for people. Even HeR Interactive they actually started advertising their games as much like this, like educationally helpful, I guess.
Yeah, we wanted to be far away from edutainment because it kind of had a bad rap
Mm.
back then. But teachers did recognize that it was inspiring, where kids would start asking teachers about questions
Mm-hmm.
about like Maya culture or something like that, and they'd be like, where's this coming from? They're like, oh, Nancy Drew. Or thinking, the kids would think like, if I researched more about this, I'd be able to solve the mystery. So it
Right.
was great that we could be inspiring, and it was important that we were as accurate as possible. We would only take liberties with the truth if we absolutely had to, like Houdini or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they've been doing these live streams now called Learn and Play, and they've really revolved it a lot around education right now, because they've had a bunch of messages and letters from teachers saying how much they appreciate the games in the classroom, even today, which is brilliant. And so that's something they're trying to push a little bit more now, which is interesting. I think it's working because they've been something's been going right, I think, with that marketing tool for sure.
Mm.
But
Great.
yeah,
And it can be cool to see like what's fact and what's fiction. What do we
yeah,
make up, and
oh yeah,
what's real.
well, exactly. Well, with like Ezra,
I,
go on. Sorry, go on.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember. So in the early days, we actually had to send our script to the publisher to
Oh,
edit.
nice.
Um, and I did. I remember for the Maya culture, talking with an expert, and they were very specific about like Maya refers to the overall peoples and culture, and Mayan is the
Oh
language,
yeah.
refers
Okay.
to the language. And so we thought like, most people say Mayan, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Mayan is an adjective, but Maya can also be an adjective too. And so we thought like, well, we want to be accurate because these people like Henrik and stuff like that are experts, so
Mm-hmm.
they're going to use the adjective correctly. But the editor sent back the script and like corrected all, like whenever we
Wow.
said Maya to Mayan, and it's like, no,
Oh wow.
it's actually Maya.
Yeah.
Mayan refers to the language, and Maya refers to the people and culture.
Interesting.
So there's always that problem of like where accuracy versus um, the issue where people's belief is different, and it
Mm.
can then create a narrative problem where it doesn't allow you to suspend your disbelief. And I'm working with a playwright, on playwriting.
Hmm.
So she was reviewing my script, and I put something in factually that's correct.
Yeah.
So this is set in 1910. I say something like, well, women can vote now, which is true in Washington State. But she's like,
Oh,
when people hear that, it's going to stop them because they're going to think, wait, no, that was 1920, which was
right.
national suffragette, but this referred to Washington State. And she's like, unless it's really important, like don't put it in because it'll break the narrative.
Mm.
And so it was something that we had to like struggle with, was like, do we do something that's factually correct but can break the narrative because people think something differently?
Hmm.
So that there was always that tension there of whether we stay true to the facts or
Right.
we give people what they want.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. That's yeah, that's really cool to hear. Really cool to hear. Awesome. Well, I think that I mean, I'm sure I've got about 1,000 more questions I could ask, but nothing's like springing to mind right now. And we've been going for about an hour and a half, hour 40, so it's it's been going for a little while. Um, so I want to say a massive thank you for one coming on the show and doing this, taking time out of your schedule to do this, and two just for everything over the years with all the games and everything. It's just been it's been a life. I'll say it's been a life changing thing for me, and it's just been so cool. So thank you for all that. Um, if there is it like what are you doing right now that you would want to talk about aside from playwriting? Are you doing anything cool in your life or okay, that's during the quarantine, I'll put it that way.
During the quarantine, no, not at all. So I am very much interested in natural history. So anything from bugs to birds to native plants. So this is time to go out, but now that we're under kind of quarantine, we can't do that. But I'm going out to my local areas. In fact, I live right near where the old, or where I guess they're not there anymore because it's the I go to the old office building area on the island
Right.
that's sinking, and the offices are now
They're like
like
a
a daycare
preschool.
center.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I can go out there because it's in my neighborhood.
Cool.
Um, and I'm yeah, so I'm also writing plays and also doing solo performances as well. Like
Interesting.
um, for the past 12 years, 15 years, I've been doing acting in the community. Did some voiceover work for a game company,
Really
just
cool.
small roles.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, solo performance is really neat because with like when you do theatrical work, it's there's scheduling issues
Right.
and with solo, like you can be the writer, you can be the director, you can be the producer, sound person, everything. So it's kind of like I get to make a Nancy Drew game by myself, but
Yeah,
it's just a theatrical production.
for
So
sure.
it's kind of fun to do that and take on my experiences and also create characters. Like
Oh yeah.
it's neat to make not only play the characters but also to create them. So that's kind of the exciting things in my creative life. And I'm sure you don't want to know the boring details of my day job. Although,
Where are you working right now, if you don't mind my asking?
yeah, so I work with at Kindle.
Oh, cool.
Um, and so I work with a team that is tasked with a problem of trying to figure out how to enhance the reading experience specifically for nonfiction,
Interesting.
which I love because, like for me, I love exploring the world and sharing what I find, and the Nancy Drew games allowed me to do that.
Hmm.
And then these different plays that I put on allows me to do that too. But I also like working on products that enable people to do that too. To learn more about their world and share about their world too. So it's neat to create tools that not only help nonfiction readers, but also writers create an immersive experience for their readers.
Oh, that's so cool. That's really cool. So, and how long have you been working there? You didn't go right from Her Interactive to there, did you? Or
No, no. So I've been with the team for a little over
oh,
a year
okay,
now.
okay,
Yeah, and then prior to that, I was working in Amazon, working on developing like investigation tools.
Nice.
So essentially, like I worked with a huge global team of Nancy Drews, and I got to create tools to help them find the bad people in Amazon.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was, and and I, when I interviewed, I talked about my experiences as HeR Interactive, and
Yeah.
so I don't know if that actually helped me land the gig or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was funny to transition from like you know making like mysteries to solve for Nancy Drew to like creating tools to help real people solve real mysteries.
Yeah.
And the mysteries were very strange. Like I can't talk about them, but
Right.
it's just like wow. In my wildest design dreams, I would have never come up with that.
Oh man, that's
People are
hilarious.
much more villainous than in a Nancy Drew game.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Robert, for all this. It's been
Yeah,
super fun.
thank you.
Oh, of
Yeah, I mean
course.
it feels really bizarre to like go to this space,
Yeah,
but it's also been a fun trip. So thanks for inviting me to probe those dank hallways
of
and
course.
musty old rooms and books that I don't ever go back again to. But it was a pleasure, and it's exciting to hear that these games still continue on.
Oh
Thank
yeah.
you everyone for keeping the Nancy Drew crew going. So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks again.
yeah, I think people are playing the games now more than ever, and it's been pretty cool. So
Cool.
awesome. Well, for those of you guys that are watching on YouTube, thank you for making it to the end of the video. Hopefully, you didn't just like start and then skip to the end, because there's a whole lot of great content that you might have missed out on.
And secrets.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, cool secrets that you'll miss out. But yeah, if I answered your question live, I hope that you got a pretty decent answer, because I thought a lot of great questions were answered with really solid answers. So yeah, and that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe we'll see Robert again in the future. Who knows?
Cheers.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.
Yeah. See ya.